Hey everyone, Rho here. Today we discuss the guilt of Prospero, the mindset of Russ, before and after the event. General spoiler warning to begin, as the events we are discussing today are from across the Warhammer 40k universe, so you have been warned. But with that said, let's just jump straight in. Well, in spending a week dedicated to a Primarch such as Leman Russ, it'd be almost impossible to not discuss the rivalries that his personality brewed. We begun the week discussing the souring of his relationship with the Lion, and we'll end it discussing its inevitable explosion. However, if there's one such rivalry that could eclipse the Lion and the Wolf, well, it's the one with Magnus the Red. Where in truth Russ and the Lion's feud was founded in arrogance, two warring generals clashing against the other. For Russ and Magnus, it was a more instinctual aversion. Two completely opposing natures, so wide apart. Magnus the Red sought knowledge above all else. He spent his life immersed in sorcery. For Leman Russ, he cared only for the destruction of his enemies, and even less in forbidden laws. To him, their father's warnings were gospel. To Magnus the Red, they were a boundary to be tested. We've dived into the building of their rivalry and history back during the days of Magnus the Red Week, and it's definitely worth going back and taking a look at those if you're interested. However, it's safe to say a clash between the two Primarchs was always a long time coming. During the Great Crusade, these two Primarchs fought together side by side, and the relationship was always tense at best. The whole scenario came a hair's breadth from the two Primarchs blooding each other in anger, and it was only the arrival and words of Lorgar who salvaged the situation before it went too far. However, the damage had been done. The already tenuous relationship was essentially shattered. Never again would these two Primarchs see eye to eye. As we know, the Imperium would be shattered with the outbreak of the Horus Heresy, and Magnus's decision to warn the Emperor of Horus's impending betrayal using the ways of sorcery ultimately led to Russ being dispatched to Prospero. In truth, Magnus had hardly abided by his father's decree anyway. However, as bad as Russ and Magnus's relationship might have been, if you were to think that Russ enjoyed the prospect of destroying a brother's legion, well, you couldn't be more wrong. And he actually sought a way to avoid any bloodshed. In the Horus Heresy novel Prospero Burns by Dan Abnett, as the entire Space Wolves Legion approaches Prospero, Leman Russ attempts to speak to his brother one last time. Now, he does this by talking to a man the Space Wolves believe Magnus has placed within their legion as something of an undercover spy. And Russ is talking to this man in the hopes that it's some kind of open conduit to Magnus, that his brother can hear everything that's being said. And Russ is completely honest with his brother here. It's one of those few genuine moments of Leman Russ that we really see him let his mask slip. He's talking simply as the man beneath. He begins by essentially telling Magnus, "Look, I'm not hiding anything. You know why I'm coming. You can see me coming. You know how I work. And you know what my legion does." And in one of the most truly emotional scenes you'll ever see with Leman Russ, he openly confesses to his brother he doesn't want this to happen. For all his anger in the heat of the moment, for all his bravado as the Wolf King, He freely admits to his brother here. He doesn't want to do this. And he even admits it's tearing at his heart. And this is something that gets so often overlooked in the Magnus-Russ rivalry. The burning of Prospero. Russ was unleashed, and with his hatred for Magnus he went too far, reveling in the prospect of facing down his brother he despised. However, the truth is that's not entirely the case. Here we see the truth of Leman Russ. The conflict and emotion that's eating away inside him. He knows he has a duty to uphold. And despite his dislike and anger at Magnus, he still feels that fraternal pull. The ties of one brother to another. Leman Russ admitting to Magnus of all his brothers that the fault of this is tearing at his heart is really quite an admission. It's Leman Russ truly opening up and laying his inner cards on the table to a brother he's always had a tense relationship with at best. But importantly for Russ, a brother nonetheless. As I've often said with Russ, it feels to me he really embraces the older brother role and aspect within the Primarchs, quite possibly without even realising he's doing so. And I see it again here. The only brother he ever truly looked up to was Horus. The rest he felt like to me that he was above. And I don't necessarily mean that in a bad way. In the way that an older brother may look down to on a younger. It was his role to keep the rest in check, so to speak. Even to protect them from themselves. As a demigod Primarch designed for war, well, that would usually result to a fight or a battle, as we saw with Angron for example. However, the difference is here, Russ knows this moment is so much more than that. He knows this isn't just a battle against a brother. He knows once this battle begins, there'll be truly no coming back. And again, for all his role as executioner, for all his problems with Magnus, he truly just doesn't want it to come to that. Again, to me, this is a truly emotional bit of insight into the real Russ beneath. Now, Russ continues by almost going into a bit of a lecture against Magnus, that older brother coming through, telling him they indulged his learning and bent the rules where they could, that they ignored it as much as they could until it became too much, and even then he refused to listen. And there's a really telling line snuck in here that is quite a telling and evocative glimpse into the emotions of Russ as this would all unravel. So this is on you. Leman Russ doesn't want to do it. He'll do anything he can to avoid it, but he's also reasoning the responsibility away here, figuratively absolving himself from the possible sin. He's basically saying to his brother here, look, we did everything we could. We indulged you, we turned a blind eye. When we got worried, we spoke to you and talked to you, and you just threw it all back in our face. And then to top it all off, you went behind our father's back. What did you think was going to happen? And this emotion and mindset is something that in the aftermath of Prospero, I really think Russ clings on to. And we'll discuss that some more in a bit. However, then Russ ends this conversation with Magnus with a final plea, telling Magnus to evacuate civilians, deactivate all defenses and surrender himself and his legion, And he even finishes it with a genuine emotional appeal to his brother. Please, Magnus. Please. Russ is almost begging Magnus here to just not let this happen. He is so reluctant to have to shed the blood of the 1,000 Sons, to shed the blood of his brother, that not only is he begging Magnus here, he's also in a sense defying the order that Horus manipulated. Instead of eliminating Magnus, Russ is clearly making the decision that he would rather bring Magnus back to Terra. Bring Magnus back to his father. Again, we need to remember here, yes, Russ was initially sanctioned to bring the 1,000 Sons back to Terra. However, this was very much manipulated by Horus. Even then, he is willing to go against his War Master to try and spare his brother's blood. Again, this is a glimpse into the true brother Russ beneath. Not the stereotype of the Wolf King, but the son of the Emperor, the brother to Magnus. How differently things could have turned out if that had have happened. I have to admit it does raise some more questions on the fate of the lost legions. Is Russ so reluctant to face Magnus here because he has such regret over the fate of 2 lost brothers? Or is he so reluctant because maybe he did bring them in, as opposed to having to destroy them? Maybe we'll discuss that another day. However, as it was, we know how it would all transpire. For all of Russ's pleas to his brother, the unfortunate truth was that this was not Magnus's spy. Magnus didn't hear a single word Russ spoke. And that is truly tragic. Magnus on Prospero believing Russ is coming, that he's relishing the prospect. However, the truth was, Russ opened his heart and appealed to his brother in a way that they had never spoken before, and it simply went unheard. It's such a tragic tale. It's not just the tale of an imperium falling apart, but a family being torn asunder. Now, in the aftermath of Prospero, Russ obviously found out he had been manipulated by his fallen brother Horus, and we get a nice insight into how Russ reflects on those events in a meeting with his brother Primarchs. With the successful return of Sanguinius to Terra, he, Dawn, Russ, Jagatai and Malkador are sitting down for a private meeting, one to find out just what's been going on with Sanguinius, and one to discuss their future plans. And this takes place in the novel Wolfsbane by Guy Haley. Now, through this discussion, Russ reveals his intention to leave Terra to face the War Master, and he gets into a bit of an argument with Rogel. And through this argument, Russ brings up him being tricked to kill Magnus. And Rogel continues the argument, asking him if he regrets it now, scornfully making a comment about him crowing about it before. And Russ, in reply to his brother here, firmly states to Rogel he is proud of what he did. Magnus resorted to using his powers of sorcery, as he always had. And so, in Russ's mind, he deserved his fate. And that statement to me really connects back to Russ's comments to Magnus before the assault. That earlier comment of, "This is on you." It really feels like this is the justification that Russ needs to focus on. I'm not sure that this is the true man beneath the mask that we saw when he was really appealing to Magnus. Instead, I think this is more of the mask of the Wolf King. It really feels like this is the justification that Russ needs to focus on to stop him feeling the guilt or emotion of Magnus's fate, to feel the guilt of Horus's manipulation. And I think this logic is reinforced by Russ's following words as he reflects. Things could have been different. He understands that Horus manipulated him into taking Magnus out because he feared the power of Magnus. And so I think there's a bit of an internal conflict of emotions in Russ in the aftermath of Prospero. He knows by the book that perhaps he did the right thing, and he rationalizes it with all the chances that Magnus was given, all the times that Magnus arrogantly continued. However, beneath that mask, there's also that element of doubt that he just can't get over. Not doubt for Magnus's use of sorcery, but the doubt that despite all his flaws, I think maybe he knows Magnus always remained loyal. Misguided, yes. Arrogant, undoubtedly. But ultimately, despite all the grey areas, Magnus's warning was right. Horus got Russ to take out Magnus for a reason. And while maybe it's not the act itself of taking out Magnus that burns at Russ, it's the fact that him doing so aided the enemy. And this is why I have such love for the character of Russ. There's just so much more depth to him than that initial observation. Even so, something so straightforward as his relationship with Magnus, it has so many more layers the more you look. If you just take the time to really look at the words that are spoken, the meaning behind them. But as always guys, what do you think? Are you surprised that Russ truly made a heartfelt appeal to his brother, even when their relationship was so strained? Do you feel that Russ truly feels guilt beneath the mask? Or do you take his words as face value? How differently do you think things could have been if Magnus had only heard those words? Would that maybe have salvaged his relationship with Russ? As always, leave your thoughts in the comments below. I love to read them. Huge thank you to all my subscribers. Your support truly means a lot to me. It really does. And if you're new, please consider subscribing to help the channel grow. But with that said, I am off, and I'll see you all again real soon.